Iowa State versus Kansas State may feel like a throwaway game, but this game will be big for more reasons than one. This is a Locked On Cyclones, Locked On Kansas State crossover.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into this special Locked On Podcast Network crossover between Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Cyclones. Thank you for making our shows your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And might be putting a bet on the table in this one, Nick, because Farmageddon 2.0 is here to end the Big 12 regular season. And obviously, we all know what happened in Ames just earlier this season. And that's probably the best of type of ammo that I have, because other than that, it is now all the Iowa State conversation for probably the rest of the show, right? No, we're definitely going to get into this episode. We're going to talk about this game coming this Saturday. Should be a really good time. Obviously, Iowa State in a really good position in Kansas State on the outside looking in. But Nick, let's dig into this one. First off, Farmageddon 2.0. This is a rivalry that not many people know about. This is one of those like unheard of rivalries, but it's one of the oldest rivalries in sports. What do we need to do to make people pay attention more to this one? I don't know. Let's go to Dublin for one, but obviously we're going to take care of it in Manhattan on Saturday.
No, who doesn't love a little bit of Farmageddon? Obviously, one of the oldest rivalries in the history of ever, I've been told by sources. As far as growing the rivalry, I think Dublin's going to get that covered, baby. Who doesn't love football in Ireland? And we'll leave that there. I will say really quickly, I think it's interesting. Kansas State seems to be catching Iowa State at the best possible time over and over. Devastating loss to Arizona after a heave from Caleb Love, and then double overtime thriller. I'm going to call it a heartbreaker loss to BYU, and you guys are right on the other side of that. That's got to feel good, doesn't it?
Yeah, and somehow, some way, we found ourselves on a winning streak each time before taking on Iowa State after being on a losing streak as well. It is like the perfect storm for the Wildcats, but obviously might be a little too late for them heading into March. I do have a little bit of rebuttal of that if they do get the win on Saturday, but we'll save that for just a minute because I want to get into, Nick, the conversation, obviously the rematch about earlier this year in Hilton. We all know about that one. It seemed like for a little bit, there was quite a little bit of slide from TJ and the rest of the team after that loss. And we've heard about this inconsistency. We've heard that from your coach as well. Take me through what has Iowa State's season looked like since the loss to Kansas State in Hilton Coliseum for the first time in how long?
Too long. I don't want to get into the numbers on that one. Honestly, the skid kind of started with Arizona. Season as a whole for you K-State listeners out there, 19-1 on the year when we have I guess now it's 19-2. Geez, when we got the full lineup out there. So a lot of winning early. Milan breaks his hand, get the win over Kansas, but then go into a weird 7-game skid where we're 3-4. Things don't look overall that great. Milan comes back, 4-game win streak. Now you've got Curtis and Keyshawn out ahead of Houston. Lose that one, but things do look good. Then you've got Oklahoma State, and what are we talking? I mean, Curtis is back. We're golden. Wrong. That one was a tough loss. Then you've got Arizona after a tough loss. What happens? Rebound. Now we're back, better than ever. And BYU, we all know what happened there. So a lot of ups and downs, and really the inconsistency thing is what everyone is kind of talking about right now in Ames. The thing everyone, Cyclone fans, was hanging their hat on was this team 19-1 when everyone's on the floor. Now 19-2 after the loss to BYU. What is the question mark? I think it comes down to the team has been it's been so many like ins and outs as far as practice goes. The mojo feels off. It feels like now it's a lot more of me versus we as far as individual offensive agendas. TJ has addressed that multiple times, and I do like that. It feels like the aggression, when it's there, but when it's not there, it's maybe a problem. Out rebounded like crazy against BYU. Obviously, the steal stands out as well. But at the end of the day, this game to Iowa State is a consistency and a momentum builder. Outside of that, I mean, we're locked into the 5 seed in the Big 12 tournament, but this is a huge game for Iowa State.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about the 5 seed heading into Kansas City. And I want to really dig into, both scenarios for both teams entering to the Big 12 tourney and quite frankly beyond later on in this show. But because you're locked into the 5 seed, does this change the feeling for this game for Iowa State? Do you think revenge is still on the table? Because again, Kansas State was a team that broke this streak at Hilton. I mean, you go into Ames and you're playing in one of the toughest environments in college basketball. I'm not afraid to say that because it's just factual basis. I mean, we had a conversation in one of our group chats about asking, is the Hilton Magic gone? I was obviously making a joke. The BYU game, and it's not the case, but the fact that I can make that joke just shows that it's such a tough arena to participate in and play in. The fact that Kansas State was able to knock that off earlier this year, do you feel like there's some revenge, even though there's a bigger picture in mind starting in Kansas City next week in Manhattan on Saturday?
I think really to answer that question, the root of the question is, does Iowa State take this game seriously? Am I wrong? Is that where we're kind of going with this?
That's a good start. Yeah. Good point.
The answer is they absolutely have to. Okay. They're locked into the 5 seed. You could make the argument they're looking forward to March Madness at this point. What does a Big 12 tournament win do for you? That's a second segment, third segment, whatever type of answer. But at this moment in time, the revenge is absolutely on the table. Farmageddon, everybody knows about Farmageddon and Ames in Manhattan. This is a big deal between these two fan bases, between these two teams also. And then on top of that, this team in particular needs to find something. It's just not rolling right now. There isn't the momentum, obviously, as I mentioned, but it doesn't feel like things are jiving as they have at any point in the season. Even during the 7-game skid, there was a moment where it felt like there was something without Milan, but there was obviously greener pastures on the other side when he's on the court. So at the end of the day, this one is huge. They're going to come in, take this game, I really hope, extremely, extremely seriously. But the question could be asked of Kansas State, the same thing. What is Kansas State really playing for here? I mean, are we playing a March Madness? Is Kansas State going to show up?
Yeah, I think they have no choice but to show up in the eyes of Kansas State. I really do. I think that you're starting to see some momentum. You're starting to see not only a build for potentially and you're right, of course, right? The momentum is starting to build up. Although they haven't shot great the last couple of games, you're starting to see some of their star players come back. Obviously, Coleman, Hawkins returning. I want to get more into that in the second segment. But the last thing I want to get to before we move on, because I love your fiery takes. And after the BYU loss, you had a great episode out there. If you haven't checked that out, check that out over on Locked On Cyclones. But because of that game, Nick, it was a 2 overtime loss. It was, I mean, quite frankly, you basically played 3 halves in that one.
Yep.
What does that do for this game on Saturday? Again, we're talking about a game that, as much as we love this rivalry, in the eyes of an Iowa State fan, you have to be looking forward. You have to be focused on trying to get to a Big 12 championship, but you have to play one more extra game now because you lost to BYU. You no longer have that double bye. You just have one bye. You're the 5th seed. You're locked in, right? So a double overtime loss, that's adding all this extra pressure. We saw a lot of players in that game have cramps. We saw them dealing with some issues. Now, this was earlier in the week. They have plenty of time to recover, but is it enough time? Are we going to see some minutes restriction from some of the stars? Is that something that you think will come into consideration and possibly impact this game on Saturday?
I don't think we'll see any minute restriction. If anything, this is crazy to say, but there is an option that TJ makes him play more because he is so serious about this team and being aggressive and going out and being just like the most aggressive team possible. Like, I hate to say like kind of twice, but that is really what he's gotten after. And, had some media availability yesterday and said, we went out and practiced as hard as we could. So I am concerned about gas in the tank, not so much minute restrictions, because we're looking at 2 extra conference games this year on top of the double overtime against BYU, which is an extra, like we said, practically an extra half. And then you look at what's he doing in practice. Are we leaning? Are we kind of sitting back a little bit? No. Do I want him to do that? No, I want him to put the pedal to the metal, but it sounds like they are going as hard as possible and trying to drive that aggressive nature back into this team. Which, is it the right play? Only time will tell. But I do worry about gas in the tank because we saw lack of decision-making, lack of driving to the hoop, lack of foot movement on defense due to the longevity of the BYU game, which is only natural. I'm not saying that that's a problem per se. There's a long game, but I do wonder if that carries over into Kansas State and then maybe Big 12 tournament, March Madness. I don't know. Only time will tell there.
Yeah, Kansas City's going to be wild, not only just the court, because that court looks crazy. If you haven't noticed that in the women's tournament, that court in Kansas City looks absolutely
Sweet.
insane. I want to tell you in this next segment, though, why Kansas State finally needs to get back into conversation and why, if they win this game on Saturday, they should be back into an at-large bid consideration from all these bracketology experts. Let's do that next on this special crossover of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Cyclones. This episode is sponsored by FanDuel. When the games tip off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can bet and place on live games throughout the game, so even you don't miss out on opening tip-off. Or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even get in on FanDuel's same game parlays. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment for me just in the game exciting, whether I'm backing a team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I miss my chance. Plus, the app is so easy to use. FanDuel has one of the easiest interfaces for any sports betting app. And when you win, guess what? You get paid instantly. So right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. That's just $150. Count me in. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment count with FanDuel, the official partner of the NBA. And welcome back to this special crossover edition of Locked On Kansas State, Locked On Cyclones. We're talking about the season finale coming up on Saturday between these two teams, Farmageddon 2.0 for this men's basketball season. Obviously, we all know who won the first game of Farmageddon. We got to make sure that we keep that one in the minds of all of you listening to this one for sure moving forward, because there's a possibility that Kansas State could get the sweep, right? And this is my thought process, obviously. Iowa State's a great team. They're going to be looking for revenge, even though if you don't think that's the case, Nick, if you think that there's a possibility that they could be looking more forward to it, I don't think that's the case. I know you didn't say that, but I think you're right. I think Coach TJ is going to make sure they're playing very hard because they have to make sure they're tournament ready. This team is obviously ready for bigger things. On the other side, though, Nick, Kansas State has this opportunity. You might not see it in their record, but they have a lot of quad one wins. And you look at all these bracketology experts, they like to push them to the side. And you talk about some of these other teams in the SEC, and I'm going to go ahead and name a few: Oklahoma and Texas. If you look at their conference standings, I'll go. Let me roll up the sleeves. Here we go. If you look at Oklahoma and Texas, and you look at their conference standings, 5 wins in a conference. Are you kidding me? Now, at any other time, now I'm not having a blind eye. I'm not obviously completely oblivious to the fact that Kansas State had a terrible non-conference. They started the season terrible. I mean, it was just not good. But what wins against Iowa State, which at the point, I'm pretty sure you were ranked like in the top 5 at that moment, at the 3. Okay. They won against Kansas, won against Arizona, beat a ranked West Virginia team. I mean, they have played some very good games and they have a good resume for quad one wins. It's the other stuff that are keeping them pushed beside. But if they sweep Iowa State, you have to put them back in consideration. I think you have to at least consider them back for an at-large bid heading into Kansas City. Do you think I'm wrong?
Let me ask you this. I'll start by saying this is kind of my reference for a lot of things. This last year in college football, things got crazy with the 12-team playoff, that's for sure. But Boise State and I think it was Notre Dame both kind of had a similar situation. Boise State with a quote-unquote quality loss to Oregon in the second week of the season, and Notre Dame with a tough loss to NIU early. Are we weighing those the same? Clearly we didn't, but it's not the end of the story. What I'm saying here is that Kansas State's early non-conference schedule, how much weight do we put into that? Because obviously Kansas State was able to figure things out. There was a period in time there where, I mean, I was a part of circles where could Kansas State win the Big 12, the tournament, of course? Could Kansas State make a real run in March Madness? But then Kansas State goes on another streaky loss type situation. Is the streakiness of this Kansas State team potentially a problem that the committee could look at? Obviously, 2 wins over Iowa State means a lot. I'm not going to say that that's not the case, but the streakiness may be something to be considered.
No, absolutely. They absolutely should. And I hate that you brought that up, and I hate that you're right, but you make some perfect examples. Okay. I gotta put my sleeves back down now because I don't feel so good no more.
Fired up.
I feel a little chilly in here now. I gotta turn the heater on. But I'll be honest with you, Nick. That's exactly how I feel. And I feel not only will the streakness be an impact for the bracketology experts, but the fact that they're having trouble winning on the road as well. I don't know if you know this. Not only was it the first loss for Iowa State and Hilton in quite a long time.
15 losses in a row on the road.
Yep, it broke a 15-game road losing streak for Kansas State as well. So it was an insane type of perfect storm, if you will. That's why I think can lightning strike twice in the same spot and see if Kansas State can do it again. I think the streaks obviously are going to impact. Road wins are obviously going to impact. There's no doubt about that as well. There was a time, Nick. Let me take you back. There was a perfect time, about 6 games this season, where Kansas State was the best team in the nation. There was no better team. The best team in the nation. I'll
when they played Iowa State, mind you.
Was a win. That's right. That's right. Quite frankly, I mean, as much as I would be really excited to see Kansas State in the tournament, I think the only way that they're going to make it there is if they win the whole damn thing in Kansas City. That's the only way that they're going to be able to do it. But if they get this win on Saturday, I think there is room for conversation to talk about Kansas State potentially being back in to the bubble watch at the very least. I don't know if it's enough to get them in the first 4 in or first 4 out, but you add another quad 1 win into that resume. Right now, they have more quad 1 wins. I just had this stat a minute ago, but they have more quad 1 wins than 3 or 4 other Big 12 teams that are considered locks right now. Wow. And it is absolutely insane. It's just all those other losses, like losses to Drake, a loss to LSU. We lost to Liberty in the or in one of the, not the Maui, but in an invitational on an island. I can't remember where they played at the beginning of the season, but it's just been a wild ride. However, Coleman Hawkins is finally back for Kansas State. I think that is something that you put in consideration. He obviously was not the same on the West Coast trip to Utah. We already know that BYU and Utah are tough places to play. Not having a healthy Coleman Hawkins doesn't help that as well. You just got to find a way to win and find a way to be gritty. That's why I asked you the question, will Iowa State be ready? Will they actually take this game seriously? Because I think Kansas State is going to put everything on the line to not only make sure they get that win, but find themselves potentially in a first round bye for the Kansas City in the Big 12 tournament.
Well, that's something that Iowa State, I feel like, has struggled with a little bit this year, being so good, ranked all the way up to number 2 in the AP poll, highest ranking in school history. It felt like there's a target on this team's back all year. And I've said multiple times, and I've said it for, I'm 23 years old, 23 years of my life, basically. Iowa State, not great when we're favorites. It feels like we have to be playing for something, for real noise to be made. Now, is that the wrong take? You're going to have to argue with me in the comment section. But the point being, when Iowa State is a huge favorite with a target on the back, it just seems like problems arise. So I don't know if that plays in here, because Kansas State feels like has more to play for here. Obviously, Iowa State locked into that 5 seed ahead of the Big 12 tournament. So will Iowa State bring everything? I really hope so. I absolutely do, because they need it. They need it from a mental, moral, motivational, confidence standpoint, whatever you want to put your finger on there. But an actual need numbers wise, I don't think they need it. And I do wonder if that'll play into the back of the minds of some of these guys. Like, why am I out here in the 20th conference game ripping myself up and down the court over a Kansas State team? Like, what am I doing? Like, we've got huge games coming up. That's what I'm a little bit concerned about. But I do think TJ Otzelberger, top 3, not 3 or 2 coach in the country, he'll get the guys right mentally. He'll get them on the same page that he is, because I know he never leaves the same page in his book with those daily habits he talks about. He'll get them right. I'm not too concerned, but there is a piece of me that's like, Kansas State feels like they have more to play for here. I don't know.
No, you're right. Iowa State has nothing to lose heading into this game on Saturday, but Kansas State has everything to gain, Nick, and that is one of the most dangerous teams you can play. It doesn't matter who the team is in that case. If they are the most dangerous team because they have everything to gain for, watch out, especially a team that has already beat you, might I remind you. But what does that mean for both these teams heading into Kansas City? Let's look farther behind this or beyond this game on Saturday. What's it mean for possibly March Madness for both teams? Let's look into that to finish up this special crossover edition of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Cyclones.
We're all about the stats because numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada PRO-4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team plus the gear wherever you go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with the room for up to 8 people, the Armada PRO-4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada PRO-4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada PRO-4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com.
Thank you for making Locked On Kansas State or Locked On Cyclones your first listen every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And we're talking the game on Saturday, Farmageddon 2.0. It's going to be madness, folks. It's going to be absolutely electric. Oh,
it's March, baby.
It's March, and we sleep in May, right? That's the wording we talk about. But it's also Kansas State senior night, too. I should mention that. It's also Kansas State senior night. That should also be another little plug, another motivation, another reason why Kansas State is going to absolutely bring it to the Cyclones. If you can't tell who I think is going to win this one, the temperature's a little changed here. I still got the sleeves down, but we're getting a little warmer here. We're getting a little more excited. But let's look beyond this. Let's not give predictions because that's just
who am I gonna guess? Yeah, I mean,
right. You're gonna take Iowa State. I'm gonna take Kansas State. That's just the way this one rolls. If you want to give a prediction, let us know in the comment description below. We would love that. That would sound fantastic. And while you're there, click subscribe wherever you're listening on podcast form, either if it's Locked On Cyclones or Locked On Kansas State, or do a flip flop. Check out the other show as well, because we are both bringing it to you every single day of the week. That's what we do here at the Locked On Podcast Network. But let's look farther on, Nick. Let's look at past Saturday, heading into Kansas City. We know that this game's not going to impact Iowa State's seeding for Kansas City, but a loss on Saturday could impact the changing for potentially the seeding for the big one, for the NCAA tournament. Now, you'll have some you can have some ground to make up potentially in the Big 12 tournament if need so. But still, one more loss in the regular season could change some things, maybe even drop you down one line, which could be huge depending on where you lie in March.
It absolutely could. There are a few games left, and believe it or not, a lot of teams are going to be playing games. So it's hard to really pin down exactly where anyone will be. Obviously, losses hurt you, wins help. In general, we've had the conversation of should Iowa State rest through the Big 12 tournament. That's an entirely different conversation. As far as the loss potentially to Kansas State, what would that bring? I don't know how much it would affect this team. I've been kind of back and forth all year. You've still got to play the same number of games, provided you're not a last four-in team in March Madness. If you're truly one of the best teams, it shouldn't matter. You have the same number of games. We're not playing for buys. At the same time, you are playing to play effectively gimme games, if you will. That feels disrespectful, but games you should win early on and facing true opponents later. I do think Iowa State almost needs those games. I think this team is struggling in some capacities at the current moment and absolutely needs to win those games in the current moment to earn those gimme games in the big one. Now, as I said, if you want to learn more about do I think Iowa State should rest up in the Big 12 tournament, that's a Locked On Cyclones podcast. I know that doesn't affect Kansas State at all. But as far as the Kansas State game, a must win because you can't afford to play someone real in the round of 32 and get bounced early. It's just not how it works.
Yeah, according to the latest bracketology, what I'm seeing is Iowa State is the top 4 seed right now. A loss against Kansas State, could that move them down to a 5 seed? Could it drop them that far? That seems a little bit much, but it might change the number of where they say it's a 4th seed, which could mean that you possibly land in a Duke or Auburn side of the bracket. Maybe that's something you probably don't want to do looking forward. At the end of the day, you got to beat all the rest of the teams to win the Natty. So you got to play those teams eventually, but if you can find a way to have a nicer, cleaner bracket, a nicer path to get there, obviously you want that to happen.
Well, and I'll throw this in really quickly. I'm a big proponent of controlling your own destiny. Whenever you get that chance, take it. Now, as you said, potentially a top 4, the top 4 seed or wherever you find your data, whatever it is. All these other teams are going to be playing games as well. So if Iowa State were to win and every other team somehow lost, if that was possible, that would go differently than if Iowa State lost and every other team won, right? So we can't exactly pin down where Iowa State will be. Iowa State can control, however, this Kansas State game. Let's take care of this one and let the chips fall where they may. You've played the season you have. You've played, and you just kind of got to deal with what's left. I don't think we leave it up to chance here. You don't know what's going to happen with the other teams. Just take care of this one. The question is for me, obviously, we've talked a little bit about Kansas State postseason. Maybe you've convinced me they maybe should have an not an auto bid, an at-large bid into March Madness here, potentially with that SEC conversation we had. What if they don't make March Madness? No, put those sleeves down. What are we looking at postseason wise for Kansas State here?
Yeah, let's be realistic here. If they don't get this win, the only way they're making the NCAA tournament, and quite frankly, it still might not matter if they don't get this win on Saturday. If they got to win the whole thing in Kansas City. Now it'll impact their seeding. Kansas State seeding is most definitely in play on Saturday. I think you can get as high as a 7 seed, which top 8 seeds get at least one round of a bye. So if you get this win, you don't have to play in round 1. That's huge. That's one game away from getting to your dream of getting to March Madness. But if you lose this one, you can go as far down as, I believe, an 11 seed. You might even be 12 seed. I can't remember, but I know it's at least the 11 seed in Kansas City. Now, those paths are really different. I mean, if I'm looking at this right now, no offense to you, Nick, but I want to avoid Houston at all cost. I mean, we did not look good against Houston. We looked terrible against Houston. I talked about this multiple times this season, that out of all the games we've played, there's been multiple games where we haven't looked good, but there's been almost in every game, there's been a reason why we should have won the game. I can't say that about the Houston game. Houston beat us fair and square in every facet of the contest. They just looked absolutely incredible, and they have looked good. Unfortunately, that's why our friends at Nissan named them the team of the week in yesterday's episode. So with that being said, I want to avoid the 8 or the 9 seed if I can help it. So the 7 seed sounds quite nice. I think a couple other things have to happen, but of course you got to get the win in Manhattan against Iowa State. If that happens, great. Move on. We win the Big 12 tournament. We're going and playing in the dance. We're dancing. Fantastic. We need that because Jerome Tang didn't make that last year. He comes in, has a deep run in his first year at Kansas State. Last year, he makes the NIT. This year, will we even make the NIT? There's also this possibility of this new tournament, this crown tournament that Fox is putting on, Fox Sports 1, where there are a couple Big 12 teams that are going to get automatic bids. Could Kansas State get that one as well? This one's an interesting one, though, and I don't know how I feel about this if they do play in the crown tourney, because it's not till later on. The tourney doesn't start till March 31st, so you have all this time waiting until that tournament starts. But let me remind you that the spring transfer portal for the basketball season starts, I think, the 24th? It starts pretty dang early for
right before the Sweet 16. Basketball. I know that.
Yeah, I think it's whatever that Monday is that the case is, and it's right by the Sweet 16. But if players leave in the portal, which unfortunately with Kansas State, there's a possibility. I'm hoping that's not the case. I hope that Kansas State can utilize that Houston model where they're trying to build in and keep players around. That's the new buy-in that they're looking to get. But there's a possibility. If they leave in the portal, what does that mean for a team that has to possibly play in a tournament a couple weeks later? So it'd be really interesting. But again, I hope there's postseason basketball regardless of the case, because if you don't have any postseason basketball, it's going to be seen as a failure. If you don't make the NCAA tournament, it's probably going to be seen as a failure, but it might at least minimize it slowly, just a slight bit, if you at least have a chance to win some sort of postseason tournament. But let's all put that behind us, because Kansas State's going to win the Big 12 tournament, right, Nick?
It's a crazy take. I'll ask you really quick. With Coleman Hawkins back, I'm curious, what does Kansas State need to do to win this one? Just 30 seconds.
Play offense. I mean, honestly, and I know that sounds crazy, but their shooting has not been great even over these last couple wins. They've played some pretty rough teams, and that's why they found a way to get the wins, but they have to shoot better. Coleman Hawkins has stepped up, although he's not 100%. David Gasson has let this team know that he's not going to let them quit, because, quite frankly, he deserves everything. But they need better shooting from Doug McDaniel, and they need better outside shooting from Brennan Hawson, something they haven't had the last 2 games. If they can do that, they're going to give you a run for your money in Manhattan on Saturday.
They certainly are. I will end this by saying there's no way Kansas State is winning this game. I don't know about the Big 12 tournament, but certainly not this one. Iowa State's going to come out super aggressive on defense. We're going to get that shot selection figured out, aggressive on the boards, stuff that TJ has talked about ad nauseum. We've talked about, obviously, nothing to play for, everything to play for. TJ doesn't care. We're bringing the aggression. Iowa State over Kansas State. Book it.
Oh, all right, fine. Well, we need to bring this back multiple times on these shows. I love having these crossovers with you. Maybe one of these days we'll bring a Guinness when we get closer to Dublin. I think that might be a thing. We might have to have a cheers for a little pregame for that. But we're going to definitely bring back these crossovers between you and I and get a little bit more into this rivalry as we prepare for a fun football offseason and what should be an exciting way. We get to kick off the college football season, you and I. No other teams can do that.
Everyone is looking our direction. Obviously, the Farmageddon name is going to be huge, and it is kind of the game that everyone will be watching. Speaking of everyone watching, for Locked On Cyclones fans, where can they find your stuff, Christian?
Oh, Locked On Kansas State, anywhere you listen to podcasts, exact same places that you listen to Locked On Cyclones. You can check that out. And you can find my Twitter X page, I guess I should say, at Locked On K-State. Nick, what about you for my K-State fans? Where can you find Locked On Cyclones?
Locked On Cyclones, baby. And then at Nick_Marv, you can see it if you're on YouTube. That's where I'm giving my play-by-play during these games. Is it worth your time? I don't know. You come check it out, find out for yourself. I can't wait to do more with you throughout this offseason as we move towards potentially a Guinness cheers for that first game, biggest game of the football season coming up.
Love it. Please like the video. Please subscribe. This has been a special crossover edition of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Cyclones.